every spring doctors are inundated with people wanting antibiotics for seasonal allergies or sinus infections. People need to get back to using neti pots, saline rinses, not just because it's cheaper and you don't have insurance, but because it's an investment in your health, because taking those antibiotics is really attacking your immune system. It's building up immunity to the next time you have an antibiotic. It won't be as effective, and it's creating superbugs. So taking control of kind of going old school to some of the things that our grandmothers did. You know, they didn't run to the doctor every 5 days for things. They didn't take their kids in if they spiked a little tout. They kind of waited. They did common sense things like increased fluids. They were more knowledgeable. And I think increasing your own knowledge of some homeopathic things, some common sense ways to take care of your own health and prevent these things is smarter.
As long as we have access to the internet, we stand a fighting chance of being able to get the information we need. Are there kinds of information we should stockpile in case a prolonged power outage or a collapse of the broadband infrastructure means we're on our own?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I personally have a really comprehensive first aid kit. And along with that, I have collected at garage sales and bookstores used first aid books that are just common sense things. You know, what if, for instance, when the Japan incident happened recently, a lot of the hospitals were down. Even in the tornadoes, hospitals are down. So if you fracture your ankle and you honestly can't get to a doctor for 24 hours because the trees are downed and you can't get out of your driveway, just learning how to set a leg, put it in a pillow and wrap it with some duct tape and, do the minimal thing that you might do that could really make a difference in how that bone sets and how a person is for the next 24 hours. Just common sense things. Those can be found in basic Boy Scout first aid books.
One of the challenges is people with chronic diseases such as diabetes or things that require daily medications. In our highly computerized, highly technological system, if you show up even to get your next supply of insulin and the computers are down or the just-in-time ordering system doesn't leave much on the shelves, what do people with chronic conditions do? It's hard to stockpile through your insurance won't let you really stockpile.
It is hard to stockpile. With diabetes in particular, that's a tough one because some of it is controlled by diet and exercise. Some of it is genetic. I think a lot of times people kind of depend on their medication. Well, I'm going out to dinner and I'm going to have dessert and I'm just having it and I'm going to have a Coke, and when I get home I'll take this extra insulin and it'll balance it out. I think getting really smart about stockpiling some things that could get you through, such as peanuts, which are long-term storage friendly and are a good source of protein, are a good idea. Being aware of what shoots your insulin up and down and trying to maintain the kind of intake with your food, not just what kinds, but throughout the day to keep it level. People with diabetes know how to do that, but it's hard to do because it's boring and not as much fun. But I think these kinds of things, getting familiar and having some of these storage food items that, they didn't have insulin a long time ago, and people kind of knew how to feel good and what made them feel good, and a lot of it's knowing your own body.
Is there also, when you think about it, a need to consider that during times of, the slow landing, which is going to take time, maybe there's the ice storm, 3 days later you're back to normal, but there's the sort of slow landing where things are changing and declining and you're going to have to adjust to fewer and fewer resources. Do we need to put a greater emphasis back on also not just things like exercise, but also personal hygiene and public health and making sure that we watch those kinds of things to keep us safe and healthy?
Yes, and these are things that people don't want to pay attention to. But I do think just common sense. But for instance, if I shake someone's hand at a dinner party, I carry hand sanitizer with me. And if I'm going to eat, I use my hand sanitizer before I eat. These are things that can sometimes be seen as a little bit hoity-toity or OCD. I don't agree. We're passing off germs to each other, and these germs are getting smarter and smarter. They're getting more virulent and harder to tamped down. For instance, MRSA is everywhere now, meth-resistant Staph aureus, and that's a hard one to deal with. You've really got to attack that with antibiotics, and one of the best ways to prevent it is simple hand washing. It is effective. All the studies they've done in hospitals about how if the staff would up their hand washing, the incidence of, in-house related nosocomial infections is what they're called, infections that you get in the hospital from being in the hospital, go way down.
We lose about 50,000 people a year on the highways, but we lose at least double that number because of drug interactions or mistakes made in hospitals. As people become more dependent on themselves for their own health care, is the chance we might actually find new ways to be healthier that would be more a benefit to us as opposed to the existing system?
I think so, because I think we've given our health over largely to the medical field, and it's been over like the last century. I'm 56, but we rarely went to the doctor. Our parents figured out common sense homeopathic ways to treat things. One of the things I've researched, which I find fascinating, is poultices. These are old school ways of treating all kinds of various things, and it's usually from things that you have either in your cabinet or outside, and they work. But it's almost like we've become too sophisticated. We don't want to take control of our own health. But I think if the time comes when we can't get to the doctor, people will have to. But it'd be nice to get control of that early on.
More than 9 out of 10 healthcare dollars are spent in the last 2 years of life. Maybe we need to rethink our attitudes towards death and dying?
Oh, this is a big one for me. I have seen so many people in their late 80s and 90s have feeding tubes placed into them. They are too out of it to even have control of that decision, and oftentimes the people that are left making those decisions are unsure of what to do and feel badly about not doing it. So I think a lot of education about, feeding tubes are a relatively new thing. And what are we doing for that person in that last year that they live, or 2 years, or whatever, as they're laying in a fetal position, unable to enjoy any quality of life? We're simply maintaining their organs. And so I've made it very clear to my children, that's not how I will not have a feeding tube. If I get to the place in my life where I'm, again, this is a very personal decision, but if I get to a place where I'm too infirm and unable to enjoy a quality of life that has any meaning, I do not want my life extended. I think a more above-the-board discussion about this is really needed, because I think a lot of those people would not want those feeding tubes.
Oh, excuse me. How clumsy can I be?
That's all right. I think a lot of people that get those feeding tubes would not have wanted them. So those discussions, those death panel discussions that got voted down, are really very important discussions to have, not only with your doctor, but with your children, with your friends, to have those decisions made ahead of time and put on paper what you want. I think the guilt that families feel about not putting grandma in a nursing home and not giving her, or mom or dad, I think there's guilt associated with not extending that life. But I think what you have to see is is real love keeping someone in a fetal position, unable to enjoy life, or is real love letting them go through that door and go on to the next life?
Many of us feel that there's almost an opportunity to hit the reset button. We live in a society where I have friends who will lavish $5,000 to $10,000 of surgeries on a dying pet. And yet we have people who have no health care insurance and no dental care, and dental care may be one of the bigger ones to deal with on your own, and few, if any, mental health services. And it seems to me that we need this sort of holistic approach to realizing mind-body connections, basic standards of care, reorienting the resources we have for the greatest good.
That's so needed. I just don't even know where to begin. That we allow the richest people in our country to get fabulous health care and fabulous mental health care and dental care, and those who are not as fortunate just have to bite it. It is unthinkable to me. I think we will look back at this time in our country and be absolutely mortified that we treated our fellow citizens like this. It is not a privilege, it's a right, in my opinion, to have basic mental health care and dental care. And I don't know how we're going to push that forward, but it certainly is needed. I think it's also a breakdown of connections, community, family. Families disperse instead of living together 2 or 3 generations at a time like we always did. So if your baby was colicky, your mom or your grandmom was there to not only give you a little break, but to say, here honey, here's what we did. You know, we put a couple drops of whiskey in their bottle or whatever. You know, whatever those old school things, it's a matter of connecting and sharing wisdom, and that's kind of broken down in our quest for independence as Americans. If the grid goes down, if something happens where the internet fails, we will be walking out of our houses and knocking on the door next door and saying, do you have a flashlight? Can we talk a minute? It hasn't come to that, and we lose out in a sense in that communal, that feeling of connection because we're in our houses Googling things and Skyping each other instead of going out and being together.
Would be better if we started now rather than waiting to hit bottom, I would assume.
Absolutely, yes. I think amassing amount of information is great, and sharing it and connecting with others is even better. I have certainly discovered as I've gotten older that connecting to other people that's where it's at. And sharing what you have, you know, material things as I get older mean absolutely nothing to me. But sharing what I have, and not just materially, but sharing myself, who I am and what I am, and wanting to get that from others that's what's valuable.
Any kind of last advice on what people could do to prepare themselves and their communities now to be healthier as times get tougher?
I think taking control of your health, learning more about how to maintain health, learning more about homeopathy and some of the natural ways. Like licorice is good for acid reflux, or peppermint tea is good for a stomach upset. Some of these really basic things that you could start trying now, and stocking up a little bit on this is just, that would be very helpful.